Hello, thank you very much. So my name is Lesley Ito, and I let's see, whoops. Yeah, so I own an Eikaiwa school in Nagoya, Japan. And my students are from preschool to the second year of high school. Okay. So a couple of years ago, I decided to do I wanted to do some research on, motivating my young learners to do extensive reading. So, of course, motivation is an extremely important part of my program because an Eikaiwa school is an after-school school. It's not regular school. I don't give grades. I'm not going to kick anybody out of my class. You can't fail my class. So motivation is extremely important. If there's no motivation to read, then no reading gets done. So I wanted to check this out because it is a very, very under-researched area. There is plenty of research for young learners over the age of 13. When I was starting this, I found this wonderful article published by the British Council. I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I want. And then I found out that pretty much everybody, they were all like older teenagers, all of them. None of them were children in any of the studies. And I found another paper from South Korea and I was reading it, and well, they're not really, there's more intensive reading, what they're describing, not really extensive reading. So as a result, when I was doing this action research for my dissertation, I pretty much had to rely on research on children in the USA who their native language was English. Of course, a lot of apparently California is a place where there's a lot of reading research going on with children. And some of the students, perhaps Spanish is their first language, but I guess they would be more ESL. Um, but this everything was conducted in a mainstream English class. So my action research project that I wanted to do for my dissertation focused on student attitudes about reading books checked out from my school's library. And then, what are their attitudes toward reading? What are their attitudes toward checking out books? How do they choose the book? What makes them want to read more? And of course, what motivates them to choose and read the books that they do? So I investigated 4 methods, which I will go into more detail later, excuse me. So book whispering, peer-to-peer recommendation, teacher read alouds, and a whole class book or novel reading, which I understand is not really technically an extensive reading method, but you'll see where I'm going with this later. Oh, by the way, if you do have a question, please put it into the chat, and I'm planning on having some time at the end to answer these. Okay, so my main finding of my dissertation research was that teacher read alouds was the most effective method for my students. However, there was a very, very interesting secondary finding, which it surprised me so many times how many times I discovered this. Things that were really effective for extensive reading motivation for children in English majority countries, especially America, I guess California mostly, these did not hold true for the children that were in my Eikaiwa school in Japan. So that really, I know a lot of times, like, especially, for me, being in an under-researched area, with teaching children in Japan an extensive reading program, a lot of times, teaching adults things that are true for adults don't work for children. I pretty much knew that, but it was very mind-blowing to me to find out that, a lot of things that held true for teaching children in majority English majority country did not hold true. So this is my school, Big Bow English Lab in Nagoya, Japan. Before the pandemic, I had an assistant teacher teach the classes with me, but now I'm by myself teaching all the classes. And These were the students that participated in my action research program. I had 91 students that participated. I didn't have any preschool kids. I just didn't want to go there. But from pretty much first graders up to about the second year of a high school. Yeah, so they were 6 to 16 years old. 14 different classes. So of course, students of the same level, or also returnee students are in the same classes, and students who've always lived in Japan, who never went to international preschool are not in in an international family. They're in their own classes themselves. So we had 42 Japanese EFL students and 49 returnees. So the classes at my school are 90-minute, once a week classes. We have 10 minutes of shared reading or phonics in class. And then during the break time in the middle of the class, students have a chance to check out books from the library to do extensive reading at home. This is a shot of a lot of the graded readers that we have, all of the readers against the wall. I love these. I love these shelves. You can see the covers so easily. All of these have audio support. And then, of course, I have another section, which is all, these are all, some of them are graded readers, some of them are leveled readers that do not have audio support. I probably have about 1,400 books in my extensive reading library. And students still self-check out, and then they read them at home. So the first method that I tried out, and actually I was planning on doing this for my for my dissertation research, my action research, was book whispering. Anybody who has read Donalyn Miller's book, The Book Whisperer, cannot leave without being completely inspired. She is a 6th grade teacher in Texas, and she gets the students to read like 40 novels a year or something. It's really, truly an inspiring story. So she gives the students a questionnaire and finds out what they like to read. And from there, then she does direct recommendation of books. I was very curious. I have always wondered has there ever been a study on its effectiveness in EFL? If there is one, I have not been able to find it. I even contacted Ms. Miller directly and did not hear anything back. So I'm assuming that there isn't. So anyway, I was at first thinking, hey, maybe I'll see, does this type of direct recommendation where the teacher finds out what the student likes and then selects books for them. Would this be an effective method? Well, I was really surprised by my students' negative reaction to this in my initial questionnaire. Oh my goodness. 69% of them said, I want to choose my library book myself. Only 9% of them wanted more help from the teacher. And only 15% liked having the teacher help them with book selection. And of those 15%, a lot of them, I had somehow been very, very successful in helping to recommend a book for them, which sounds good, but it's actually not so good because my students, I don't see them for a semester. Students who sign up for my school, oftentimes they'll be with me, their entire educational career probably. The kids have been there for years and years and years. I get to know them very, very well. And yet I was not successful in directly recommending a book to them. So from this, I was like, well, I guess book whispering is not going to be an effective method with my students. I had to find something else to do. But it really hit home for me how autonomy is very important for children. Children do not like people recommending things for them. They like to do it themselves. As one of my students very bluntly put in the comments, he said, like, just stay and I'll do the read and choose, he said. Well, so I went to try 2 different methods. So teacher read alouds and peer-to-peer recommendations, which are both indirect methods. Okay. So for research from the USA, I found a case study of Brassel in 2003. He's kind of a very popular figure in the sort of California reading community of the teachers of the teachers of children. So he had an article that he read he read 16 books to his class, and no, 17 books to the class, and like 16 of them got checked out, and was talking about how reading aloud to the students made the students want to read the book on their own. For peer-to-peer recommendations, a lot of these came from, teacher blogs. Teachers recommending, people recommendation shelf, posters, or library pockets where students can leave messages to classmates about recommendations. Some of these were a little bit problematic for me to implement because I have an Eikaiwa school. It's not like I have one classroom with one class that stays in the classroom all day. I have kids coming out all the time. So if I were to do posters, I would be putting up and taking down posters. So that just really kind of wasn't going to work. So for teacher read alouds, I had 7 different classes that I decided to do. So I remember if you remember from the beginning, I had 14 classes. So I decided to split them up in 2. So one group was teacher read aloud. One group was peer-to-peer recommendation. So teacher read aloud, we had 7 different classes. I had 4 book series were introduced over 4 different classes, which of course were selected for the level and age of each class. So here is an example of, what I was doing for like a first grader class. So I have Elephant and Piggy here. And so I read Elephant and Piggy, which is very easy to do in a dramatic and humorous fashion, since those books are hilarious in and of themselves. I read the book to the kids. I got them laughing. I got them interested. And then I put them on the table right before it was time to check out books without saying anything. So I was not recommending anything. The kids, they were there if the kids wanted them. And a lot of the times they would check them all out. They would be gone. For peer-to-peer recommendations, I had 7 classes. This teacher read alouds was pretty easy for me to implement, and I knew exactly what to do. For peer-to-peer recommendations, this got off to a bit of a rocky start. Before I started this, I realized that through voice recording, students were not recommending books to one another. Or if they were, I wasn't catching what they were saying to each other. I had taught a couple of classes on the university level and had done book talk, which is when, students get into small groups and recommend a book to each other. I tried to do book talk with the younger kids, with the elementary school kids. This did not go over well at all. They were just like, what do I do? What do I say? Even students who are returnees, who are very, very fluent in English, could not do that. They just had absolutely no idea what to do. I would even tell them, I would have, prompt sentences on the board, and they were it was not successful. And then the older students, when they would read a novel, they were like, oh, I don't want to talk about the book again. They were bored with it. So instead, what I decided to do is little postcards. So since I had, like I said, I have so many 50, so many classes coming in, every couple of, like 3 times a day, we have a different class coming in. I had like a pocket, like wall hanging, and all the students would make postcards. So I would put up the postcards for that particular class. This is what the postcards looked like. So each student made 2 postcards of books they liked to help with recommendations. So each class, I would put up the postcard and say, okay, so here are the recommendations of your classmates of different books that you might be interested in. So it had a picture of the student holding the book, and then they wrote a quick little blurb about what they liked about the book, which of course, this activity had to be very, very scaffolded. And then I put them up on the wall chart like this. Of course, the students' faces I've blocked out here. So which was more effective? Teacher read aloud. So this is enjoyment. 83% liked it when the teacher read the books aloud. So it was had a very overwhelmingly positive feeling toward it. For the peer-to-peer recommendation, the kids the meaning of what we were doing got lost. A lot of them, most of the comments talked about, I had fun making the postcards. Looking at the postcards to get recommendations for books, it just seemed to really get lost. 41% enjoyed telling the classmates about the books they liked, talking about with the postcards. So we had the postcards up, but also sometimes the kids would hold them up and talk to each other about them using the postcards. And 59% enjoyed listening to their classmates recommend a book. But of course, 83% to 41% or 59%, that's a big difference there. For the peer-to-peer recommendations, younger students who of course borrow 5 books a class, enjoyed this a lot more because they had many more books to talk about. Older students who read novels, they complained constantly after the first week about how boring this was, and they were tired of talking about their book. So for motivation, for teacher read alouds, 69% said the teacher reading aloud made them interested in the series, and 50% wanted to check out more books from the library. And out of the comments, 20 of them said they were interested in or wanted to borrow what the teacher had read aloud. For peer-to-peer recommendations, so 59% said they wanted to check out books recommended by classmates, as you can see. Interestingly, most of the students who said this were not returnee. 62% of them wanted to check out more books, and 44% of the returnees did with peer-to-peer recommendations. And out of the comments, about half of them said they wanted to borrow or recommend books. Now, look at this slide. You can see that for peer-to-peer recommendations, a lot of the kids said they wanted to check out more books. They wanted to recommend, they wanted to borrow these books that were recommended to them. However, okay, wait, keep that slide in mind. Keep that slide in mind. Okay, for this one, for the purpose, 63% understood why we were doing this, that I was reading books to them to try to get them interested in it. For peer-to-peer recommendations, they kind of lost the plot. They thought the purpose was to make a postcard. But however, like I said, in peer-to-peer recommendation, it took a little while for it to get going. That could have contributed to the lower enthusiasm. Okay, so remember the slide where the peer-to-peer recommendation kids said, oh yeah, majority of them said, yeah, I'd like to check out more books. Well, when I actually looked at their actual borrowing behavior, using the data that I got from the Lixon library system that I use for checkout, the results were very, very dramatic. For the teacher read aloud group, before this project was implemented, the books that were recommended to them had only been borrowed 4 times. Okay. After they were borrowed 106 times. Now, of course, I did introduce some new series to this. But it seems, 68% were borrowed from those newly introduced series. So kids were saying that, yes, they wanted to borrow more books, but then also their behavior reflected what they wanted to say. For peer-to-peer, it was interesting. The books that were recommended were borrowed more before we started everything. So out of this 78 recommended books, only 12 were borrowed after. It was just truly dramatic to me what they said on the questionnaire and what they actually did. It was a huge gap. So definitely teacher read alouds are so much easier to implement. You don't have any arts and crafts, it was just so easy to implement and was so much more effective. So I've actually, after this action research project finished, I started implementing it and doing that a lot. And I do that to keep the motivation high to borrow different books from the library. Okay. Maybe you have seen the vile hatred that a lot of teachers in English majority countries have for round robin reading or reading aloud, popcorn reading. So popcorn reading or round robin reading is when, okay, so student A, okay, you read a little bit. Okay, now student B, you read the next part. Student C, you read the next part, and so on. Vile hatred for this kind of classic, I guess, method. Research conducted in English-speaking countries had a very negative review of whole class novels and reading books aloud together. They said maybe it's good to expose the kids for literature, but for actual reading, perhaps it's a ineffective method to use. I could not find anything positive anybody had to say anything about that, which shocked me because I was like, I've been doing this for years and years. So I had been doing this in the 10 minutes of classroom instruction. So we all read the same book together. So like I will read some and explain to the kids what we're doing. And then I'll have the kids read what I read. And then from there, from the series that we read together, I have, like with the book that we read together, I have other books in that series. And then from there, students, if they're interested, then students can borrow it. So reading the class novel together led to narrow reading, where students sometimes finding their home run book. And here are just a few of the titles or the series that I have done this with. So I really began to doubt myself, like, wow, should I stop doing this? Do my students secretly hate this? So I included something about this in my initial baseline survey, my initial baseline questionnaire, to find out what was really going on. And some of the reason why I was doing this too was because students in my school, they're still building up their reading skills. And then also too, once after my initial shock, I was started reading a bit more, like, what am I really doing? How would I really define what I'm doing? Then I kind of came to the conclusion, like, okay, I'm not really doing round robin reading. I'm doing something more like shared book experience, because I'm reading it to them. I'm explaining something and, helping them understand something more than what they could read. The books that we oftentimes read are not something that they at that moment in time would be able to read on their own, but with support of their classmates, with support of the teacher, then we can all enjoy this book together. So it was more shared book experience what I was doing. So reading the books together in the class, it was, so these if you're wondering what these smiley faces are, this is instead of doing like the Likert scale, this is a more effective method to use with children when you're doing research. So a smiley face, or kind of a non-committal face, or a frowny face. So as you can see, a lot of the students really like to do the book reading, which sometimes included phonics, activities in the class. And they also felt that reading the books in class really helped improve my English. So while the teachers in English majority countries had a very negative view of what I was doing in the classroom, my students really seemed to think it was a very positive and helpful activity for them. And like I said, I mean, a lot of them, would end up borrowing books from the different series. So my conclusion was that my EFL young learners found shared book reading and reading aloud in class to be helpful, and both teacher read alouds and shared book reading promote narrow reading. Okay. And okay, let's start with questions.
Thank you very much, Lesley. Thank you.
You're
Fantastic.
welcome.
I think the first comment was from Rob about SEG. Do you know the SEG school in Tokyo?
Yes,
they do this
I've
recommended
observed
reading.
his class. Right. Yes. Okay. So SEG. Yes, because I've been there and I've observed the class. Yes, they do. Um, kind of like book whispering, and I've watched that. I've watched that. You know, in action, and yeah, it's interesting. And I sort of wonder, well, you know, it might be because a lot of the kids are there for a very specific purpose. SEG students are there. A lot of them, you know, are, you know, aiming for Igakubu. They're aiming for, you know, medical school. They want to improve their the English scores so that they can get into an elite university. They have a definite goal. My students, no. So that might have a bit to do with it. And also, I mean,
Right.
you know, SEG is what, like from junior high and up, right? SEG's yeah. So my students,
Exactly.
I mean, of course, some of the students were junior high school, but you know, a lot of them were younger kids. Okay, I love teachers reading to
Right.
me in elementary school. Me too. Me too. And I love reading to them. I get to relive my childhood every day. Okay. A comment on other students post too, and they write that they chose the book because I write. Yeah, like going what Kimberly said about, you know, the universe. Yeah, we see that was my experience too. I mean, I just taught, well, like 2 comma a week in a university, and I taught reading classes, and yeah, the students were recommending books to each other all the time, but the kids, I don't know, they weren't recommending to each other. And you know, like I said, I mean, once we got the postcard activity going and they had their little postcards and recommending to each other, I thought for sure that this would translate to students borrowing those books, but it really did not. Can reading be done to each other in pairs? Yeah, I guess so. Sometimes we do group, like right now, we are using the ABACS book, like those reading fluency books. Love those. So I will read it, and then the students get into small groups, like the groups of 3, and read together. Yeah. Um, if the students are, I mean, you don't want to try that with first graders. This is going to fall apart. You know, the little kids, they just need more supervision. They need more scaffolding. You know, older students, they can do this. Yeah. Okay. Quick question around reading aloud. I don't see your question.
Oh, sorry, Leslie. It was from me. Leslie. Hi.
Hello.
I finally get to meet you. We have both actually published graded readers for Helica. Um, but yeah, this is the first time for us to actually meet in face.
Nice to meet
I'm
you.
Paul McAleese, by the way. My question is, I'm just curious. So you talk about reading aloud being popular with your learners, and
Yes.
how you read aloud to the class, and then you put
Yes.
some of the books on a table and just left them there, and the kids took the
Oh, so
books, right?
you're referring to the teacher read aloud method.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
And I was curious, were they taking the exact same book that you were reading, or were they choosing a book from the same series that you were reading? Was there any?
They were choosing a book from the same series as I was reading. So one book is read to the students.
Okay.
Or if it is like a short novel, then the first chapter is read to the students. So
Okay.
just to give them a taste of what it's like.
I see. So if you read the whole book, then that's not an option for the
We
others.
do that. That's what I was talking about at the end. That's what I was doing in the class. Like, for example, the picture that you saw was the students, we were all reading the first Magic Treehouse book. And then
Yeah.
in my library, I have Magic Treehouse up to book 45. So then those are available to them.
Okay, so they continue reading. Is
If
that
they
what you
choose
mean?
to do so.
Okay, I see. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
if they choose to do so. You're welcome. Okay, Francis had a question. Do you read the same novel over many weeks for higher level students? Yes. We will spend, you know, for the older students, sometimes we'll spend like a whole year reading the same novel together. For the novels, a lot of novels are really difficult to get through, as you can imagine, if you only have 10 minutes in the class. 44 lessons over the year is difficult to get through. So I will do like 1 week I will read, and then the next week I will read a little bit, and then the students will read. So we read that all together. I started doing that because I wanted to help move the kids up, especially returnees. So returnees, especially returnees that like were living in America or Canada, when they come back to Japan, then they sometimes they tend to fossilize and stay at the same reading level. And I wanted to sort of, pull them up as they were getting older and encourage them to read, you know, more, things that maybe aren't so super easy for them, to help them to grow as they grow, as they get older. And I wanted also to expose them to a lot of Newbery Award winners. So anything that I choose in the class, a lot of them are Newbery Award winners, or, some book finalist or won some award. So we read those together. Yeah. Do somebody ask questions as you do the novel read aloud? Not with novels. When I read with the kids, I ask them tons of questions, especially since there's pictures to go with it. So I'll ask a lot of questions, to keep them engaged, have them guess what's going to happen next and such. Novels, we only have 10 minutes. We don't really have so much time. So a lot of times I will, do you know what this means? Or, if especially if there's oftentimes, the things that get into the obstacles to comprehension are not necessarily linguistic obstacles. They're more cultural obstacles. Okay. So do you know what this is? Have you heard of this type of thing? So that I try to anticipate what the obstacles are going to be, and we go over that. Okay. Yes, I read 10 minutes. We read 10 minutes in class together. That, of course, I mean, if we have a textbook and such, we will end up reading more, in the class, but just focusing on pleasure reading, or now, reading just to enjoy what just reading, we'll spend about 10 minutes.
Lovely. Sandra has a comment as well about Stuart Gibbs Once Upon a Time.
Well, not just as a passing thing. We've been reading Stuart Gibbs' Once Upon a Tim in class, not time, Tim. And that's been really effective.
Oh, I've never heard of that. I'll have to write that down.
It's a series of 4 books, and the chapters are really short. So you can get through a chapter per lesson. And then he has these IQ boosters, which are just, he uses a word like malodorous, and then he'll explain it a little bit. And then he'll reuse it during the rest of the series in the book. So really, really recommend, just a new discovery of mine. So just sharing.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. It was wonderful to hear different recommendations. That's great. Okay.
Who's the
any other
publisher?
questions? Wait, I feel the
Sandra.
many Japanese students. Oh, somebody wrote me okay. Embarrassment. Okay. Wondering if students are embarrassed. I have not experienced that. I've had like students being reluctant, but I think, I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably a bit of a different atmosphere in an Eikaiwa class as opposed to a regular, your regular, junior high school class. So I've never actually taught in a regular junior high school class, so I can't really comment. I'm just sort of imagining in my own school, that's one thing is like, I oftentimes when we talk about extensive reading, everybody, how can you motivate students? How can you motivate students? You cannot motivate a person. You have to create an environment where people will feel motivated. And if you create an environment where people are not embarrassed, where it's okay to make mistakes, where you're expected to make mistakes, where you're expected to try, if you create that environment, then the students will be more motivated.